patterns that you should really be drilling and getting sorted before 1000 elo, but certainly above 1000 elo, up to 1500 elo. Make sure you're really confident with these. We're looking at 2 rooks, we're looking at a rook and a queen together, even 2 queens I've just added in there briefly, and just 1 queen or 1 rook, how we get those checkmates. There you do see stalemates and just people moving back and forth, certainly below 1000 elo, and it's really one where you've done all the hard work and you just need to finish off. Some of these patterns are really useful to know for other points in the game. You know, they might not be affected by pieces elsewhere on the board or a couple of pawns elsewhere, so they can be really useful. I'm on my journey to 1500 elo. I'm posting games, training and puzzles, so I hope we learn a lot together. I hope that I'm doing this really for my training, but you'll see me demonstrate a few of the things that I know and how I keep pretty sharp and confident with these positions. So with the 2 rooks, I typically follow a kind of ladder mate pattern. So it might look something like this. Now, one option when the king gets too close is to run to the other side of the board and carry on. And I'll show you another option later. So with the rook and the queen, I want to get to a position where the rook and the queen are just 1 square distance between them. So I'm going to come in like this. Let's go here and then here. And each time what I'm going to do is I'm going to move so that the rook moves, and we're basically going to form this sort of 3x3 square until we get down near the end here. Now if I go right in like this, it's going to get disrupted. So in this case, because I'm protected by the king, I can go right down. But what I really wanted to show you was I'm just going to sort of artificially back up a step and show you that where the queen cuts off this middle square, you've got this safe 3x3 square, and then the final checkmate once you get to the edge of the board. I find this particular pattern moving the rook where it's defended by the queen, and then after that you move the queen, and you can often almost pre-move this series of moves, and the king is just moving up the centre of the board until checkmate at the end of the line. That's a really helpful pattern to know. I mentioned that I don't always run to the far side of the board. When the king gets close, rather than going across and finishing off the ladder mate on this side, another option is to just double the rooks and then cut and then make some progress. Double the rooks and then either one can make some progress. Double the rooks. It's just kind of a zugzwang where the king is forced to go away, and again either one can deliver the checkmate. Again, I emphasizing that this is different patterns that can be useful in games at different times. It's not about having 2 different techniques to do this checkmate when the ladder mate comes up. You can choose one of those and just have that as your favoured method, but sometimes in a game one of these patterns will work for you in a specific position and one of them won't. Okay, the position with queens, a bit like where we had the rook and the queen just 1 square apart. With the queens, I like the position where there are 2 squares between the queens. So I can bring either of my queens into this square, and I'll draw out on the board why this is particularly favoured with the queens. The queens defend each other. They cover the files and the diagonal. One of them's covering the dark squares and one of them's covering the light squares. So you end up with a huge coverage, And you can always move diagonally to those opposite corners and see where the king goes. And if you can see that from here the king had no choice. From this square, this queen was covering the dark squares, this one was covering the light squares. We were covering the 5th rank, we were both covering all of the e-file. This queen was covering the dark squares. So from this square you can see the king only had one space to go. We just moved from this configuration on the diagonal. We're going to do the same thing here and it will be checkmate. Again, you'll see that we're covering so many squares with the queens. The king would be in checkmate, but even if they were further out, the king would be covering these squares. So remember, when it's a rook and a queen, you're looking for just one square between them and go in a 3x3 square. So like this kind of coverage. And when it's 2 queens, you're looking for 2 squares apart and you've got 4x4 square coverage, almost. Now with the queen, I'm going to show the knight opposition checkmate. So I'm going to move into what is called knight's opposition, and then we're just going to mimic all the king's moves diagonally this way, just horizontally, horizontally again, until the king reaches the edge of the board. And as soon as they reach the edge of the board, we're going to stop and make sure we don't stalemate. Sometimes if we're in knight opposition here and they're here, they move like this and we go here, we will stalemate them. So from this position, 2 of these moves are not safe, they will be captured by the king, but one of them is safe and traps the king in these 5 squares of the board, critically on an edge rank or file. I'm now going to move my king, essentially pre-move these 4 moves. I'm not their king, because this is not a rook, this is a queen, their king cannot attack my queen. I'm just going to get closer to their king. So at this point we're going to stay outside the scope of their queen, and it is checkmate. Sometimes if they end up in opposition, we have more options. We'll obviously have some sort of back rank mate type moves, or we'll have this option, but if they're in one of these corner squares and we're only here, then this is the checkmating square. With the rook it is significantly different. I'm going to show 2 methods here. Let's start with the distant method, sometimes called the wall of fire. Basically a barrier that their king cannot cross. So I'm going to move up to the 3rd file because they've moved back. So here they've kind of moved back of their own choice, so we're going to take that space. We didn't put them in check, it's their own choice. And now I do not want to step into opposition, I want to wait for them to step into opposition at some point. I'm keeping away from this rook barricade, and when they choose to move back into opposition, the king is stopping them from the 4th rank, the rook is going to stop them being on the 5th rank. They are going to yield some ground. I do not want to step into opposition at the moment. I'm going to stay on the D and E, and every so often I'll have to swing my rook to the other side, and sometimes make a little waiting move to get them to step into opposition and push them back. So the king had these squares, so when the rook gave the check across here, they had to move back. So there I did step into opposition, I didn't really mean to. This is a kind of, again, we swing to the other side and sometimes put in a waiting move. You learn, again, this is drills, this is learning it very consistently. You see how I do it. I'm just going to reset and show you a slightly different technique, which is the close method, where the king and the rook stay constantly guarding each other, not guarding each other, but the king stays constantly guarding the rook. I'm going to make progress with the rook when I can and when it is still defended by my king. Technically this would be progress, but I can see faster progress with, you can kind of see me. Okay, so a couple of options. I could go here, not really making progress. I guess in this case really I should make the progress this way. And I like this position. You can make any number of waiting moves, not any number, but you've got loads of options. You just need to stay on the 6th rank, and their king is forced to allow you to give the checkmate now. Okay, thanks for following along. I hope that gives you some ideas. Go along and find your best system to drill these checkmates. Make sure you're good at them. Find my bishop checkmate patterns and my bishop and knight checkmate pattern video. I will be probably doing a refreshed version of those very soon. I might link them here once they are done.